questions? Okay, good. All right.
She's trying to.
Something and something, yeah. As we said in the service this morning, the reading this week is really the exact halfway point in the Gospel of Mark, which means you've got a lot of reading to do in a short amount of time. And we'll talk about that. But basically, Mark has two distinct periods, and you can describe them by locations. One, the first part is Galilee. The other is Jerusalem. And so that you will hear this in the way that the early readers of Mark did, this is Park County. Marion County.
Oh, okay.
Or maybe the county that I use in. In other words,
And I don't mean Maryland.
This is a bad crowd to go there.
well, Jesus may be getting large followings and response here. That would not remain a secret here, but not be that important. And basically, in Judaism, like in Catholicism, things can happen anywhere, but unless they happen in the place, in their case Jerusalem, in the Catholics' place Rome, it ain't happened. Okay? If you are inside the Beltway, DC, then that is the center of the universe, and the fact that you don't even know the cost of bread or gas outside the Beltway is of no interest to you. And so part of what has to happen, if the whole concept of a prophecy being fulfilled in the Messiah, it's not going to happen up here. It's got to go here. And so part of what happens in this confession of Peter is, okay, I have worked, we don't know what time period it is, but this entire reading that you have so far, I'm going to fulfill part one. The kingdom of God is at hand. How do you know that? Have you been watching and listening? Okay. So then the question is, did anybody get that? Did anybody understand that? And that's why Peter's confession is essential. Say, somebody actually said it. Now we've heard it before, but from the wrong people, right? They're from the Gentiles and the demons. They don't count. The Jews have to say that. If the Messiah, if the fulfillment of the promise that God will send a Savior to the Jews, it's got to happen among the Jews and in Jerusalem. So, I have finished phase one, and that is, who is this man? He is the Christ. Okay, what does it mean to follow him? And that's going to be everything that you read between now and Easter. And the great messianic secret is a QAnon theory that can only be found on the dark web, right? See, some of you know what I'm talking about, and the rest are going on. Why do we need a secret? Why doesn't Jesus say, let me tell you why. If this was the Gospel of John, this question would not have to be asked because John will answer it over and over again. John won't. John will have Jesus say it. Okay? In Mark, it's just the opposite.
He wants you to think of it.
Pardon?
He wants you to come up with the answer.
Because that's when you own it.
Right.
You know? How many times do you tell your kids things that they need to know and they ignore until they experience, and then what do they say to mom? Why didn't you tell me?
My son explained that one time.
Yes.
We were looking at college, right? And he's kind of like, oh, I am looking at colleges, and I am finding all this stuff, and I'm trying to talk to him. And eventually he's looking at some college later, a couple years later, and I said, well, John, I had all that stuff. He said, Mom, I couldn't pay attention to that because you mentioned it. Now, if you had just got that stuff and highlighted it and left it lying around he didn't like my secret.
Yep. Well, and and I've said this before, is that, you know, I respect that about Mark's approach. A lot of Christians are uneasy with it. You want to hear it like it is, and it must affirm it. And that's one of the reasons John's gospel is so popular. You never doubt, you know, from the first word, you know. But if you were paying attention, Mark starts the same way. This is the good news of Jesus, the Christ, the Son of God. And then he goes and tells you the story. And it's all a secret. So, and why is it nobody can understand? And they will continue not to understand. Until what? Easter. Because how can you understand something that's never happened? Okay? Okay? And so, and that is so profound that Paul writes, I am resolved to know nothing but Christ and Him crucified. That, you know, I must go to Jerusalem, there die, and on the third day rise again. Okay. For Paul, that is what you need to know. That's why the cross is the symbol of the faith. That is the act. Okay, good. All right. All right. Okay, now that I've told you everything that's going to happen, you don't have to read the rest of it. So. Except, of course, it'll all be on the final. So that's the problem. Okay, we started the week with day 23, the recrossing. And why are we recrossing the lake? Just kind of get you back in the flow of the story.
Okay.
Pardon?
Let me get back to where you said that.
They had been on the other side doing what?
Healing people.
Pardon?
Were they healing people?
Oh, yeah, but what else?
Preaching, they're
Pardon?
trying to get it to,
Different groups of people.
Yeah.
On one side of the lake
So
and the other.
is
It
one
gives them
side the
privacy.
Jews and one
Yep.
side the Gentiles?
Yes.
Is that why that crisscross?
want to get to.
Why was there talking about bread in the boat? Why was that subject brought up? Okay, let me try this way. Why did Jesus say, how many baskets full of bread did you pick up when I fed the 5,000? And how many did you pick up when I fed the
4,000.
4,000? Where did the 4,000 take place? On the other side of the lake. They're on their way back from that, and they got the take-home sacks, and yet, you know, they're talking about bread, and, you know, he just asked, well, you know, we got a loaf. You know.
In my thought, what I wrote down, was their thought of going, okay, we only have one. Jesus, we only have one, and there's 13 of us, and we're really hungry, Jesus. I mean, they've seen what he did.
Yeah.
Well, how about us? You know, we're hungry.
Yeah.
That was my take.
But it's not about the bread, right?
No.
It's about the leaven in the bread, which is the yeast, and
Yeah,
it's
that's
symbolic or not?
kind of one of those, you know, while we're talking about that, reminded me, the Pharisees are like leaven, like the yeast in the bread. They get in there and it gets to
Stir up
working at
stuff.
you. Yeah.
Make it bigger.
And as soon as they get on dry land, what do they run into? See, right in the book, it tells you. Day 23. What?
Blind man.
A blind man. Now,
Yeah.
was this man blind from birth? What does the internal evidence tell you?
Well, I gotta remember which one was this. Hang on.
If the blind man had said when he's, you know, his eyes are not
I
yet
think
clear,
yes.
I can see red,
Oh, yes.
why would you say he wasn't born blind?
You
You would know what it was.
So how can you talk about people walking around looking like trees
Right.
Right.
if you've never seen a tree, you
Right.
know? Okay? That doesn't prove anything, it just strongly suggests it, okay? Why is that story right there? Right there.
Because the disciples were just like that, I guess.
How many times I gotta knock you upside of the head before you'll see? Yeah, I think that's why
Yeah.
it's there. You know, why is this the only miracle of Jesus that it took 2 touches to heal? I think entirely to make a point, you know? Why is it you keep going to Bible study? I mean, wouldn't one time do you?
No, hardly. You clearly see you didn't.
I think this whole it's a book of Mark, but these sections too, and they give me hope because I'm struggling with doubts all the time, and I'm so dense all the time, and you know, it seems if the disciples were that way, maybe there's hope for me. I'm
Amen,
this
sister,
lowly
amen.
little person
Yeah.
down here compared
Yeah.
to the disciples.
And these are the ones he chose. So if this was the pick of the litter, you know? And maybe it wasn't. Maybe they were chosen not because they were, you know. Okay, day 24 is the whole confession of Peter. Do you have any questions about that incident? Jesus says, when Peter says, no, we can't let you do that, he says, get behind me, Satan. What is being said there?
Because he wasn't ready or able to accept.
Biblically, the role of Satan is the question.
Right.
Oh, really? Is that really what God is like? So he told you that if you eat this, you would die. I wonder. Think about it. See, we turn that into this vicious power that's out to get you rather than, well, maybe I can promise God I won't do something and go ahead and do it and God will love me. I mean, isn't that the same kind of, you know? Okay, all right.
Don't forgive me and let me go on.
Yeah. It's just like Santa Claus, you know? If Santa Claus is Santa Claus, I'm going to get presents anyway, so why be good? You know? Well, I tell you, some older kids figure that out pretty good, you know? It was interesting to find myself putting lines into the story of Peter's confession that in fact aren't in Mark. They're in the other accounts, which I found myself doing what I tell you not to do, and I can read them together. You know, there is no praise of Peter in this, you know, which you're used to, you know, Simon, you should be Simon Bar-Jonah because, you know, man has not revealed to you this came from the Father above. Not there. I think it was, you know, I'm running out of word space and I'm only allowed so many words. But it keeps the bare bones of the story. Peter said, it was Peter's expression, Jesus then moves directly on. And you have the first of 3 predictions Jesus gives of his death, and they hear all but one phrase. What's the one phrase they never hear? And on the 3rd day,
He rose.
That he's gonna.
why didn't they hear that? I mean, we go,
Because they wouldn't have believed it.
why not?
Oh.
Never happened before, so therefore, why even think about
Why 3 days? 2 days, 4.5.
it? Yeah, why 3 days?
I mean, the race with the dead, they'd already pushed that aside, so.
But was that part of their Jewish belief to begin with? I mean, they knew a Messiah was going to come and make everything right, but they didn't know that the Messiah was going to have to die and be raised from the dead and all of this to complete the mission, right?
You've been to Palm Sunday. Is that a procession of the dead?
No.
No, we are conquering heroes, you know, put on the crowns and so forth and so on. That was the preconception. That's how Messiah will
It
come.
would only be natural that Peter wants to protect him, you know, and
And protect
you're not
himself.
going to
and us,
die.
yeah,
Let's,
yeah.
you know,
Okay.
we can do this to
Okay,
protect you.
you dealt with it today, but this has been my question about, this is this, we say Jesus the Christ, but what do we mean? What does that mean? What did that mean to them, the Messiah? And you spoke to that, the promise of God to send the Messiah to restore them. what does that mean? What did that mean to them, to restore them as a great nation? So they would be the great nation and people would come to them and love them. That's not the way we understand what Christ means. So for us, the word Christ means something totally different than Messiah, but what does Christ mean for us? Okay, so that's what the book's about.
Yeah, that's very good.
So I guess at the end, we could answer the question.
But see, that's the whole issue of why Jesus has to teach them what does it mean to say you are the Christ. Because they had preconceptions. Have we talked about the 3 general preconceptions?
That was what?
Blank, blank, and blank.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay, good, you got that. Well, obviously, a king like David. And the one you've never heard of,
Oh.
Judas Maccabeus, who about 100 years before Jesus ran out the heirs of Alexander the Great's rule over that part of the world and reestablished the kingdom of Israel. And they had a triumphal entry to Jerusalem, and they took branches off the tree and waved them. They took their cloaks and spread them before him and sang, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." They didn't make that up on Palm Sunday, folks. It was right out of the book of Maccabees, which, by the way, is part of the Apocrypha. 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Maccabees. This was recent Jewish history. And so when they could almost say it will be like the days of Judas. But see, David's far enough in the back that he's like anything far enough in back, it's perfect. There was never anything that went wrong.
Yeah,
David,
but Judas, he didn't last.
no.
Judas Maccabees.
What happened to Judas, the kingdom that he set up, is that he died, and then somebody took the throne, and they had to dispute over who was going to be, the heir, and so they called in a third party, Rome, and Rome solved the problem. Yeah. Boom, get rid of all of you, we're in charge. The other was, you could call it spiritual in a loose sense of the world. This is that the Messiah would restore that perfect relationship we once had with God. And that perfect relationship was about 30 seconds after Moses came down from the mountain. And then they started trying to live, and it worked perfectly, right? I mean, nothing ever went wrong. But in this group, this is the group, and it's part of the reason so many questions are put to Jesus about the law, because there were those who go, well, the guy says good stuff, is he this? The other was miracle worker. Yeah, spell that somehow.
I have to decipher this stuff.
And what miracle in the history of Israel would they go back to? There were really a couple, actually. But Passover, the whole series of contests where it was a contest between the power of Pharaoh and the power of this God that doesn't have a name. That was a miracle. And then the Exodus from Egypt, a miracle. And then why did we come out in the desert to die? And there are 40 years of providing daily bread. Now, when you think that the lifetime of the average person was 30 to 35 years, what you were saying is for your entire lifetime, God provided your daily need. Give us this day our daily bread is a Jewish prayer. We say, give us today our daily bread and the bread that we need for the next months and enough to provide until we finally die of old age in the nursing home. See? Okay, so if Jesus then can find 5,000 hungry men in one place and there's a basket full of somebody's lunch and he can feed all of them, what do they think of? Messiah, Moses. See? So these were kind of generic wide bands, This was the most popular because it's the most obvious, because that's what we think, you know. We need to be strong as American, and, you know, let's take that big bomber and bring peace to that land, obliterate it, you know. Spiritual would probably be, in our culture, politically correct, although that won't work because that gets you on the left side of the sheet. You've got to have the right political stance. We just need to get rid of anybody who disagrees with our understanding of what it means to be America. And then we will once again be God's chosen people, just like God chose us. Israel. Yeah. So this is what's called Christian nationalism. But in the time of Jesus, if you said Messiah, if there are 3 people standing there, they got 4 ideas. And so what Jesus is essentially doing is saying, okay, you've said the right word, but I don't think you know what I mean by it. You notice what Jesus turns out to be isn't on the list. If you were to turn to the Old Testament and you wanted a scriptural source for Jesus' idea of a Messiah that saves by taking the place of sacrifice, what book would you turn to?
Hosea.
What's the story of Hosea, basically?
He marries the prostitute.
Why? Because she is what she is. Yeah, right. You know, yeah, it is a sign of how much do you love. Even though you know this love is not going to change it, you're not going to stop loving. Okay. So that whole idea from Isaiah, a suffering servant shall come, that is not absent. It just wasn't too popular. And that's part of what Jesus has to take this time to explain. There's a purpose in all this, and you've got to wait till you live through it, past it, before you can really grasp it. Okay.
So are the current day Jews still waiting for the list to happen? What is their current view of what this Messiah is? And
Well,
what happen and looking for versus the old Jews?
I would say it's probably as confused now as then. Obviously, there's a lot of it still centers with land and why there's such an investment in Israel. And there, they've got the conflict between the political pragmatists and the Orthodox Jews. You know, it's better to be pure than it is to make sense. When the state of Israel was founded in 1949, they had to get the Orthodox Jews, that's the conservative Jews. And by the way, saying conservative Jew is kind of like saying Jew, but I mean, they're conservatives and conservatives. Because one of the things you cannot do is you cannot work on the Sabbath. And if you're a soldier, that's your work. That wouldn't work. Because the last war, they were attacked on Yom Kippur, a holy day. See? So part of what was written into the state of Israel is a soldier may fight in defense of Israel, regardless of what day it is. Jews in this country are really 2 groups, the Orthodox and the progressives, which are much more
When I was in college, my brother was going to MIT. We were going to drive up. He was taking his roommate with him to bring back his girlfriend. So they needed a female. His roommate was Jewish. The girlfriend was Jewish. I was going to stay at the girlfriend's house. Bill was staying with what's his name? The boy's family was Orthodox Jew, lived in the Bronx or Brooklyn or something in a walk-up, you know. And the girlfriend lived in Queens, nice house with a yard, whatever. They were Reformed. My mother just said to me, if something's not on the table, don't ask for it. You know, just because at Kevin's house, they had separate dishes they ate. At the other house, it's like, well, what kind of bacon do you want for breakfast? You know, so I mean, here we're too Jewish, and then for this little West Texas girl going, I don't understand that, you know, but, yeah. So when you talk about being Jewish, and then my mother invited one of my brother's classmates for Thanksgiving one year, and instead of having turkey, decided to have ham. Oh, we didn't know. The kid ate it, you know, he was fine with it. But yeah, who knows what the answer to that question is? I don't know what we never got into theological discussions.
So how do you understand, you know, what's your take on the transfiguration? That's on day 25.
Unbelief, like, am I seeing what I'm really seeing?
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah. I still wonder why the three were even there.
that's what I was.
This seems
I
to
had a
be about
question.
Jesus,
Yeah,
not about the three. And
and why Peter, James, and John?
favorites. I mean, you know, it's a clique. You know, nobody ever gets the leading role. They all predetermined. I mean, you know, I don't know.
I mean, there was 12, and that's why I just.
Yeah. Well, the others had work to do down at the bottom, and it's going really well. And Peter, James, and John are saying, I wish I'd have stayed up on the mountain. Yeah, it's like, is this more of the lesson? You know, are the three of you supposed to witness this? Because the action is entirely between Jesus and the three. You know, it's almost like this is Mark's, although it's not just in Mark, heavenly approval, which in the other Gospels is at baptism. You know, the heavens opened and a voice from
Right.
the Spirit came down. Is this something they needed, something Jesus needed? And what does transfiguration mean?
Changed.
Yeah, but if it's transfiguration, it's not like he stopped speaking in a West Texas dialect. It has to do with how you
How you look,
you
right?
look, yeah.
I mean, like,
Right.
probably brilliant white. I mean, he probably had a glow about him, didn't he?
Is there an Old Testament story like this?
Moses.
Moses
The burning bush.
came down from the deal, and you saw Charlton Heston in the movie. Man, he had the worst case of sunburn you've ever seen. The guy was positively red. You know, and I mean, that's movies trying to figure out some way to portray a physical change. And you've seen that in people where you notice some change in them. And you figure, I had a girl in the church in Crawfordsville, you know, grew up. She was always beautiful. She never smiled. And I would work during the times I wasn't standing up and trying to get her to smile. And I could. And her parents wouldn't believe that she did. Then she met a boy. And she smiles
I was
all
gonna say,
the
she
time.
couldn't quit.
Yeah.
You know, and you're going, you know, and for her, it's a transformation. You know, I mean, and I think in the heart of that, there is something to all this. If it's just physical change, who cares, you know?
Okay, so in Exodus, it was just Moses.
Yeah.
And in this one, it's like you said, reveals to these three witnesses.
Mhm.
So in this story, it's kind of like, maybe nobody believed Moses or that wasn't. But so this time, we have witnesses to that.
which would answer the 3. Because in Jewish deal, you gotta have at least 2 witnesses. So I guess 3 is a magic number.
And also in Exodus, he comes down and they've already decided to build a golden calf.
That's why I said it lasted for several seconds.
Yeah, and that's the same thing here.
Maybe they need this for their missions going forward
Yep.
at some point too. That's why they were chosen.
And what is it they want to do?
Build it in the church.
A shrine.
Yeah, we need to mark this, to remember it by, and that's the problem with going to Israel now. You know, everywhere you go, there's a church, you know, to where Jesus, you know, dropped his lunch. Church of the Holy Litter. What's wrong with those things, those holy sites? They're commemorating something holy happened here,
All in the past.
okay? Are they useful? And if so, in what way?
So they can reflect back on what happened.
That's a jury.
Think about it. Like,
I was thinking.
What'd you say?
I said it built their jurism.
Well, it does that, you know, but our need for it, that we need to go there,
Yeah.
you know.
2 examples, Bethlehem.
Yeah.
Because,
When you go to Bethlehem and underneath there's a star that they put in the ground. And we as Protestants watch the Catholics on their knees crawl, the old ladies crawl to that space to be able to touch it. For them, it is holy ground.
yeah,
And you're just, you want to be able to do, and then if you've ever been to Mexico, the Virgin of Guadalupe,
Mhm.
that huge big cathedral, and people on their knees crawling to that, because that's where Virgin Mary appeared. So it does have a spiritual effect. But like you said, for those people, that's a doubt. Or in wherever it was, the healing thing, where you have the things where there's healing takes place. That people go there.
Sanctuario de Maya. It is rank paganism.
yeah.
God is contained in things. And the reality of it is, we believe something happened to them that was godly, or happened in that spot. And if I could just be in that spot, if I could just touch that thing, some of that power would come to me. There's a lot of faith in it, but it's in,
So,
this is holy.
so this church had 2 holy places. How hard was it to get rid of
Yep.
those 2 holy places and build a new? I mean, with that.
The white church, the brick church.
Yeah, yeah, so that.
Oh, I understand that it only took 1 meeting and about 5 minutes. And, you know, the amount of time it took to do what they felt was both good and maybe even necessary, but still, you know.
Why Elijah and Moses?
The 2 faith heroes of the Old Testament. Moses is the lawgiver. Elijah, where is Elijah?
Prophet.
Where is Elijah?
Oh.
Did he ride up in the?
Went up.
He rose up in the wind.
And what's going to happen?
He's coming back someday.
Yeah. What happens at every Passover, even to this very day? We pause. We look to the door to see if Elijah is going to come.
Elijah comes before the prophet.
Yep, yep. So they asked Jesus, are you John the Baptist or Elijah? Was John the Baptist of Elijah? Okay, go ahead.
Question. We've been hearing all these places, but Peter, I mean, he's at all the good stuff that's going on. And then, but we know, in the end, he denies Jesus. And is that a lesson for us that, you know, even though we can be on a high and then bottom out, but then
Yes, it's supposed to be a lesson, and you're right on. Yes, even then, you're still, I had one of these great insights one time trying to figure out what to do about Judas. And it occurred to me, what would have happened if the rope had broken and Judas didn't hang himself? And he wakes up the next day and goes, well, I think I'll stumble around and see if anybody will speak to me. And there's Jesus and Peter. Would he have been left out? The answer is no. Okay, plunging along. Day 26. This is where the incident about who's number one. There are two references in the readings. I think they were both this week. And I'm kind of moving on down to day 27, where children come up in the topic. The first one, Jesus gives the example of, be like a child, which a lot of us think means be childish and proceed to act that way. This is the occasion where they bring children to Jesus, and the disciples, being in charge of order, crowd control, shoo them out of the way. Because in those days, children were not valued. Okay? It becomes the scriptural source of the children's moment. Let the little children come to me. I think that's like so much of what we do, it's trivializing, being trivial about it. Because what Jesus says in the first case is, unless you come as a child, which we translate that as childish. And as a child is not the same thing. What quality does a child have that the kingdom of God needs? They're willing to believe, they're open, everything is amazing. If you could just, because what is everybody else? Well, no, I don't think that's what happened. I think if you look behind the curtain, you'll see there's somebody moving a stick. And that's what we're really seeing. There's no miracle here at all. A child just goes, wow. Now, what if that was all of you ever did? You never got any further. And I like the fact that a lot of the translations say, suffer the little children to come to me, because very often we're suffering. So. But it is a part of the reversal of roles scenario, that in that culture, children were not the centers of the family life. They were not, that was, I used the phrase, I think in the book, we worship our children. We make our children our life, and our children don't care. They want their own life. Thank you very much. That what Jesus is showing is that, again, folks, you have pre-ordered all of this, and that is not the way God does things. These children are as much a part of the kingdom as everybody else.
I think, like children, I wrote down the least, the last, the lowest, the innocent, the unknowing, and the trusting.
Ooh,
Jesus,
that's good. You ought to write something like this.
I'm a good teacher.
That is also day 27, the teachings on marriage. And I put in the study deal that divorce and marriage were as much a problem then as now, but they were complicated by the fact that a Jewish male could divorce a woman for any cause. And he only had to say it out loud 3 times. I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you. And then what was her status? She had nothing, because she had been her father's child until she married, and then she was her husband's wife, and when she was divorced or he died, she was nothing. And so the Bible talks a great deal about widows and orphans, because they were the cast-offs. They have no value, they have no place. In Jewish law, much like early America, a woman couldn't even own anything, no property in their name. When my dad retired in switched sides and became part of a bank. He discovered an amazing number of women, wives, didn't even have their names on the account. That's changed,
And I was, interesting, you were never Susan Nichols, you were Mrs. Chestnut. That was your name, was.
Yeah. So marriage and divorce were as much an issue then and as troubling to society, and it's compounded by the fact that it left one half of the marriage, the woman, bereft. At least now, you get some alimony and the kids anytime you don't want them. And then my favorite story of all, day 28, which I refer to as the RYR, the rich young ruler. Didn't read the book, did you?
No, I did, but I'm between breaking bread and looking at this, I'm thinking, what does that stand for?
Oh.
Right. And I guess the reason I like it so much is he is the epitome of everything we value. He was rich, he was young, and he was good looking. I mean, it just goes with the territory, right? Because if you're not good looking, we can make you that. And yet, he comes to Jesus aware that there is, even with all that, there is still something missing. And Jesus sees that in him, and in such sees what the heart of the problem is, and he tells him, all you do is get rid of the things that make you who you are, and then you can enter the kingdom of God. And he goes away. And like so many people who appear in the Gospels, we never know what happened to him. For all we know, the next day he said, you know what? I have just paid the rent on 27 storage units in which I'm keeping all my stuff. What good is it? That Jesus is right. I mean, we don't know.
I like the part that Jesus loved him.
Yeah. It's like, one of the greatest commandments, well, I've kept all of these from my birth. That's a pretty bold claim. Jesus doesn't question that. He accepts it. Great. And if he has, then why does he come to Jesus? Because he knows that's not enough. He has done everything the world has said is what you need to have everything. Okay, next week will be our final time together, maybe. It is going to leave you with having only read 8 verses of chapter 16. That's your Easter morning reading. And see, I kept it short because some of you have to pronounce each word as you read it. And there is a possibility that on the following Sunday we might get, not Easter, but the Sunday after Easter, we might get together for a brief recap, a celebration, graduation celebration, and a talk about what do we want to do in the summer.
So we'll all get gold stars and Betsy won't be the only one.
I'm still school style on summer. Well, part of what I need to know is, okay, how is this working? Why is it working? What would make it more adaptable? The other is this is a very focused way of doing the Bible, a book at a time. And there are 66 of them, so we could fill a lot of time. I don't know if that would be that helpful. There are other things, like what are the theological themes of Christianity? Those need to cross the lines. And so let's look at the 24th, and this will be, I want to stress the word brief. See,
Because you're getting ready to go on vacation.
yeah, because see, some of us got here at 8 this morning, and we're still here.
Some of us drove.
Yeah, some of us don't leave. And what we'll do is, and I'll put this in the update or the newsletter so you can have thought about it. I'd like your feedback in writing. This is the dumbest thing I've ever done, or whatever it is. I'll give you some ways to question that, and then
No, but he won't
I'll
know.
suggest to you what we might possibly do to get your feedback. And then we'll all go down to the bar and have someone. Yes, ma'am.
I think we don't know what we don't know, in a
Okay.
sense that if you give us an open sheet of paper and say, you know, what are we interested
Yeah.
in or what do we need, I don't know what I don't know, but somebody that's had the experience of doing these over the years of different things, what are some common things that we need to see the bigger picture, or
Yeah.
what are some gaping holes that are common in the growth of.
Well, that's what I'm gonna do,
So-
and it's gonna be, okay, this would be dissimilar in that it's not a daily reading, but it is a reading in preparation, and it would not be weekly.
How will this work if you're only here every other Sunday? After April, aren't you only gonna be here every other Sunday?
No, after April, I can be gone up to 2 Sundays a month.
Right, so what do we do? We'll just know ahead of time those
You
2
just-
Sundays a month?
You just cry in loneliness. We can, yeah, we'll plan that. And one of the things I was thinking about doing is, we may deliberately do that by video, because with summer, there's more travel and less people here, so that it doesn't become, oh, I'm gonna miss this month, or the, which also makes it available to more people. And if we just had some way to do that. Okay, very good. Any question about what's gonna happen next week? Holy Week? Okay. What time is breakfast on Palm Sunday?
9:30.
Okay. What time is church on Palm Sunday?
10:30.
And when do you need to be quiet in the sanctuary?
10:30.
By the way, that went very well today. Very pleased with that. I was
Quick learners.
really pissed last week, so not a good thing. And what time is the Holy Week service on Thursday? 7. You'll be out by 8. And what time is the Easter sunrise service?
No.
Nada. Good. And what time is the Easter hot cross bun breakfast?
9:30.
And the Easter morning celebration? 10:30, okay.
Do you get grades on that?
Pardon? You get grades on that, yeah.
I want you all to know too that you think, I've done it like 3 times, so I should be getting a gold star at least on the 3rd time.
You need to get over.
All right. Thank you, folks.
Betsy, thank you for playing the piano.